Hola clase! So today we're going to start our new topic, which is reflexive verbs. We're going to see reflexive pronouns and the present tense of reflexive verbs. So what is a reflexive verb? A reflexive verb indicates that the subject does something to or for themselves. In other words, the subject does and receives the action. We have already seen that the action is shown by the verb. So with reflexive verbs, the subject does and receives the action. That means that the verb acts upon the subject. There is also reflexive verbs in English, but in Spanish it's more common than in English, the use of reflexive verbs. So for example, when you're saying the verb despertarse, in English is to wake up, but in Spanish despertarse is a reflexive verb. And you can see that because you have here the verb in the infinitive form and the reflexive pronoun is attached. That means to wake oneself up. So the verb is acting upon the subject. The subject is waking up and is also receiving the action of waking up. So you just have to memorize which verbs are reflexive in Spanish. Another verb that's reflexive in Spanish is peinarse. So in English you would say to comb the hair, but in Spanish this ending, reflexive ending, makes it mean that you are combing your own hair. So the subject is performing the action but also receiving the action. So the verb acts upon the subject. So reflexive verbs in Spanish consist of two elements, a reflective pronoun and the verb. So in the infinitive form, you can recognize a reflexive verb because it has the reflexive ending se attached to it. Bañarse, despertarse. Bañarse means to take a bath and despertarse means to wake up. So in the infinitive form, always remember the reflexive pronoun is attached to the end of the verb. And then when you conjugate the verb in the present tense, the reflexive pronoun changes its position and goes in front of the conjugated verb. So we have me, te, se, nos, o se, depending on the subject. And then you have also the verb conjugated in all the subject pronouns. Yo, tú, usted, él, ella, nosotros, nosotras, vosotros, vosotras, ustedes, ellos, y ellas. You can see bañar is a regular AR verb and despertar undergoes a stem change from E to IE. So that's what I'm showing here, the stem change verb. Okay, so what you have to know is that the reflexive pronoun must match, that means must agree with the subject pronouns. So yo, the reflexive pronoun is me. Tú, te, usted, él, ella, se. Nosotros, nosotras, nos. Vosotros, vosotras, os. Ustedes, ellos, y ellas, se. And the verb must be conjugated according to the subject too. So that's why you have baño, bañas, baña, bañamos, bañáis, bañan. So as you can see, if the subject is yo, I take a bath today, you're going to say yo me baño hoy or me baño hoy. Me must agree with the subject and the conjugated verb must agree with the subject too. So if you're saying my sister is taking a bath today, you're gonna say mi hermana se, the ella form, baña hoy. So always remember, reflexive pronouns must agree with the subject. And when the verb is conjugated, the reflexive pronouns, they are placed in front of the verb. When you have the verb in the infinitive, the reflexive ending of the verb is shown by attaching se to the verb. So we're going to do some exercises. So you have to complete the following sentences only with the correct reflexive pronoun. Remember that the reflexive pronouns always agree with the subject. Okay? And here I'm giving you the reflexive pronouns. Here you can check your answers. Okay, we're going to see more examples. So you have the verb in the infinitive that are reflexive. Acostarse means to go to bed, despertarse to wake up, vestirse to get dressed, levantarse to get out of bed, ponerse la ropa to put on clothes, and sentirse that means to feel. So here I have an example. You can pause the video to go through these examples more carefully. But you can see that the verbs are being conjugated as usual. If it's a stem changing verb, it keeps changing. That's why acostarse is a stem changing verb from O to UE. Acuesto is conjugated in the yo form, and the reflexive pronoun changes from the ending se to agree with the subject. In this case is me acuesto, so I go to bed. Despertarse, to wake up, this stem changing verb changes from E to IE, so that's why in the to form you have despiertas. So los fines de semana te despiertas tarde. Te is the reflexive pronoun that agrees with the subject. The subject is tú. The verb also agrees with the subject too. So los fines de semana te despiertas tarde. On the weekends you wake up late. Vestirse is also a stem changing verb that changes from the E to the I, to get dressed. So ella se viste elegante. Se is the reflexive ending in the infinitive form, and then when you conjugate the verb, the reflexive ending comes to form a reflexive pronoun that agrees with the subject. In this case, the subject is ella, so the verb agree with ella, viste, and the reflexive pronoun, it also agrees with ella. She dresses elegantly. Here I have some other examples, AR verbs, ER. So as we have already seen in chapter 1, poner, it's an irregular yo form. Pongo. Poner is only irregular in the yo form. That's why in the vosotros form, it's not irregular. So poner, it's like the verb tener, tengo. It's irregular in the yo form, but it's not irregular in the other subject pronouns. So vosotros siempre os ponéis ropa fea. Os agrees with the subject. Vosotros ponéis agrees with the subject. You always put on ugly clothes. You in the vosotros form. Sentirse, to feel. So that's also a reflexive verb in Spanish. So you have to remember that these verbs are not usually reflexive in English, but in Spanish they are. Mis padres se sienten bien. My parents feel good. Se, the reflexive pronoun, agrees with the subject, mis padres, ellos, ellas form, and the verb sentirse also agrees with the subject. I have here a mistake. This is also a stem changing verb from E to IE, as you can see here, from E to IE. Here I have a list of some reflexive verbs that you should memorize. At least you should memorize these reflexive verbs, because these verbs that are reflexive in Spanish are not reflexive in English. So I would encourage you to memorize these verbs. And we're gonna do an exercise, so you can stop the video. These are also in your book, so you can study them from there or from this video. We're gonna do an exercise in the next slide. Ejercicio 2, reflexive verbs. This is gonna be a multiple choice exercise, and you just have to answer the questions from 1 to 7 and from 8 to 14. And here you can check your answers. Okay, we're gonna do another exercise, ejercicio 3, conjugation. So you have to conjugate the following reflexive verbs in the present tense. And I'm showing you here if the verbs undergo any stem change. Remember, the reflexive ending, when the verb is conjugated, it's placed before the conjugated verb and it agrees with the subject. Remember that ponerse has an irregular yo form, and sentirse also undergoes a stem change. Okay, here you can check your answers.
I have some other notes about reflexive verbs. So, notice that when a reflexive verb is used with a part of the body or with an item of clothing, the definite article el, la, los, las precedes the noun. Parts of the body or clothing are generally not referred to with possessive adjectives. If you remember possessive adjectives like mis, dientes, mi, cabello, tus, manos, but with definite articles, since the use of the reflexive verb is already indicating that the action is done to oneself. So I have here some examples. Me cepillo los dientes, me cepillo el cabello, me lavo el cabello, me lavo las manos, me lavo los pies, me lavo la cara. Me pongo la ropa, me pongo los zapatos, me pongo el pantalón, la playera, Me seco el cuerpo, las manos, las piernas, los pies. So as you can see, these are reflexive verbs. Cepillarse, lavarse, ponerse, secarse, which are indicating that the action is done to oneself. So you don't need to use possessive adjectives. And we're going to do an exercise. So you have to select the correct article plus noun. So remember that the article always agree in gender and number with the noun. Here you can check your answers. When the reflexive verb is used as an infinitive, as we have seen structures as ir a plus infinitive, deber plus infinitive, preferir plus infinitive, or as a present participle, as we have seen in the present progressive tense, which is the verb estar conjugated plus a present participle. So you can either place the reflexive pronoun before the conjugated verb or attach to the infinitive or the present participle. And we're going to see some examples. So when you have these types of structures in which the reflexive verb is a verb in the infinitive, then you can either choose to place the reflexive pronoun in front of the conjugated verb, me voy a levantar pronto, or attach to the infinitive, voy a levantarme pronto. Another example is, debes dormirte temprano mañana. You have to fall asleep early tomorrow. So you can either choose to put the reflexive pronoun attached to the infinitive or in front of the conjugated verb. Ella prefiere ducharse en la tarde. She prefers to shower in the afternoon. So again, the same. The reflexive pronoun goes either attached to the verb in the infinitive or in front of the conjugated verb. Ella se prefiere duchar en la tarde. Both of those options are correct. So when you have the present progressive tense, which is composed by estar plus the present participle, and your present participle is a reflexive verb, then you do the same. You either place the reflexive pronoun in front of the conjugated verb or attached to the present participle. Me estoy levantando. Estoy levantándome. Te estás durmiendo. You're falling asleep. Estás durmiéndote. So you can either choose to put the reflexive pronoun in front of the conjugated verb or attached to the present participle. Remember that the progressive tense is only used when you are describing actions that are happening right now. Ella está duchándose. She is showering. So again, you can either put the reflexive pronoun attached to the present participle or in front of the conjugated verb. Ella se está duchando. As you can see, the reflexive pronouns always agree with the subject. Like the conjugated verb must always agree with the subject. We're going to do an exercise, la próxima semana. So you have to complete the following sentences by conjugating the verb in the parentheses and adding the reflexive pronouns. You can either choose to put the reflexive pronouns in your answers before the conjugated verb or attached to the infinitive. But you just have to write one of these options for each sentence. So for example, yo, and then you have your verb in the parentheses, ir a ducharse temprano el lunes. So you can either fill in the blank with voy a ducharme or me voy a duchar if you prefer to put the reflexive pronoun attached to the verb in the infinitive or in front of the conjugated verb. Either of those are correct, and you just have to write one of them in the blank. Here you can check your answers. So the last part is to talk about reflexive versus non-reflexive verbs. Unlike English, a number of verbs in Spanish can be reflexive or non-reflexive. If the verb acts upon the subject, the reflexive form is used. If the verb acts upon something other than the subject, then the non-reflexive form is used. So compare the following sentences. Lavo los platos. Me lavo la cara. So lavo los platos, I wash the dishes. Who is performing the action? I, yo. And who is receiving the action? In this case is los platos. So that's not a reflexive use of the verb lavar. Lavarse. So I wash my face. In Spanish, this is a reflexive verb because the action is being performed to oneself. Ella seca las toallas. Ella, she dries the towels. Ella se seca el cuerpo. She dries her body. So as you can see, in the first one, ella seca las toallas, she is performing the action and the towels is receiving the action. But in ella se seca el cuerpo, she's performing the action to herself. So it's a reflexive use of the verb. Despierto a mi amiga. I wake up my friend early. Temprano, early. So, and the second one is me despierto temprano. Me despierto temprano comes from despertarse. That's a reflexive verb. You wake yourself up early. But despierto a mi amiga temprano. I wake my friend early. Is different because I am performing the action and my friend is receiving the action. Ella baña a su perro. She washes her dog. Ella se baña. She takes a bath. So bañarse here, it's a reflexive use of the verb because she is washing herself. But ella baña su perro. Ella is performing the action, that's the subject, and el perro is receiving the action. So, as you can see, when there is a person or an animal that's receiving the action of the verb, you need a personal a. So the preposition a here, despierto a mi amiga. Ella baña a su perro. For example, if you want to say that she is drying her dog with towels, so you would say ella seca a su perro with las toallas. So we have here the last exercise. So you have to select the correct answer from the parentheses according to the sentences. You have a reflexive use of the verb and a non-reflexive use of the verb. And here you can check your answers. Gracias.